Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf is analyzing the Mishnah discussing saving tefillin that are left outside in the street on Shabbos. So at the beginning of the Daf, we'll be discussing a pair of tefillin which looks new and are concerned that it might not actually be tefillin, and it might be kameyas, might be amulets made to look like tefillin. The Gemara will then discuss when you have tefillin from somebody, from a tefillin dealer, how many pairs of tefillin do you have to check to establish that he's a reputable person. Then the Gemara will go through the rest of our last Mishnah, phrase by phrase, and have comments on each of them, and the Daf will end off with the next Mishnah discussing somebody who dropped a sefer and it unrolled. When is he allowed to roll it up if there's no Eruv? So, first of all, we had said that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about a new pair of tefillin that looks new. Can you assume that it's tefillin and save it, or do you have to be concerned that something else is going on and you shouldn't save it? So up to now we understood that Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you shouldn't be machal iser derabanans on Shabbos to save a new pair of tefillin, is concerned that it might not be tefillin, it might be a kemeya. And the Gemara had said, therefore the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is, would somebody actually go to the trouble of making a kemeya look just like a pair of tefillin? Now the Gemara says, I'll tell you another pshat over here. We have a statement of Shmuel's father, the son of Rav Yitzchak, who said that when we say new tefillin, old tefillin, we don't mean new tefillin, old tefillin. We mean tefillin that has the ritzuas, the straps. Are they tied in the correct knotting, or are they not tied in the correct knotting? If they're not tied in the correct knots, that's called new tefillin, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda said you're not allowed to save. And it seems to be that the implication is that the reason you're not allowed to save them is because you can't tie the knots. Therefore, they're not functional. You can't bring them in. There's no way to carry them into Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos because the knots aren't there. If that's the case, the Gemara says, first of all, there's no argument about whether a person would go to the trouble to make kameyas look like tefillin or not. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you allowed to tie the knots or not? So now the Gemara says, hold on a second, why can't you tie them in a slip knot? We know that you're allowed to make a bow or a slip knot on Shabbos, so why don't you do that? So Rav Chizda says this obviously means that a bow is puzzle to be a tefillin knot, and therefore that wouldn't work. Abaye says, no, this is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that you're not allowed to bring them in. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a slip knot or a bow counts as tying on Shabbos, and it's forbidden to make those knots even on Shabbos. So Gemara says, so what does that mean? That Abaye holds that if not for that problem, you would be allowed to make a slip knot or a bow for tefillin knots? That's what he's implying. The only issue over here is that it's Shabbos, otherwise you would be able to make the bow. So Gemara says, don't we have a statement of Rabbi Yehuda Breder of Shmuel Bar Shilas, in the name of Rav, who says clearly that the exact knots of tefillin are halacha Moshe Misinai. They have to look like either the letter Dalid or the letter Yud, and depending which tefillah they are, and there's a certain shape and style, and it has to be that way. And we also add on to that the letters should be facing outward, so you should be able to read them when looking at somebody who's wearing the tefillin. So how can you make a bow or a slip knot? It's a different knot. So the Gemara says, no, there is a way to make it in the same letter. You could have the Dalit or the Shin or the Yud, just it's a slip knot style, but it would still fulfill that halacha. Okay, now the Gemara switches gears slightly and discusses a tefillin dealer who's buying a lot of pairs of tefillin wholesale from somebody. And the question is as follows. The person he's buying from is not established as an expert in tefillin, and we don't know if the tefillin that he's making are good. We don't know if they are kosher. How many of them do we have to check to establish that he's an expert tefillin manufacturer or seller, and to assume that all the other tefillin are good as well? So the Gemara doesn't assume that this person that you're buying from manufactured them themselves. The Gemara is assuming he also bought them from others. But anyway, Rav Chizda says the halacha is that you have to check 3 tefillins, not 3 pairs, 3 tefillin, and 2 shal rosh and 1 shal yad, or 2 shal yad and 1 shal rosh, meaning 3 tefillin, and they have to be, at least one of them has to be from a different set, either, you have to have at least one of each of shal yad and shal rosh. So Gemara says, what should be the reason for that? What should be the reason for that? If you're concerned that this guy bought them from other people, and that each tefillin comes from somebody else, then you have no chazakah. It won't even help you to check 3 of them. The fact that you check 3 doesn't create a chazak if you're concerned that he bought them from others. And if you're not concerned that he bought them from others, so it should be enough to check any three. Why do you need to check just specifically two shayad and one sharosh, or two sharosh and one shayad? Why do you have to have one of each type? So for that, the Gemara says, really we're assuming that it's all bought from one person. All these tefillin were manufactured by the same individual. We just need to establish that he knows how to make a shayad and he knows how to make a sharosh. If you have to check at least one of each. And then the third one, so that you have to have a set of three in order to create a chazakah. You don't have to check three of either one. So Gemara says, 1 second, but that can't be. But we have a halacha, we have a brisa that was brought by Rabbi Bar Shmuel, who says that tefillin you have to check 3 shel yad and shel rosh. That seems to indicate either 3 shel yads or 3 shel rosh. That means you have to check. You don't have to check one of each. You just have to have a total of 3. Any combinations? Okay. So on that, the Gemara says, no, that's not how you read that. It's 3 shel yad or shel rosh, meaning any combination of the two, but you do have to have at least some shel yad and some shel rosh, meaning you have to have 3 shel yad and shel rosh, at least one of each, and 3 altogether. So Gemara says, well, 1 second. You have a brisa quoted by Rav Kahana, who said that tefillin you only have to check 1 shel yad and 1 shel rosh. So how are you telling me you have to have 3 with 1 shel yad and 1 shel rosh? He says you only have to have 2 1 shel yad and 1 shel rosh. Gemara says that's different. That brisa is holding like the opinion of Rebbe. Rebbe holds that chazakah, that the tefillin are kosher, is created with only 2. In all of Shas, Rebbe holds that chazakah, the assumption that of a certain status is created if you see it twice. You don't have to have 3 times. Gemara says that if this is Rebbe, and he holds that you could create a chazakah twice, so how come in the end of the brisa, that same one, it says that if you're buying bundles of tefillin, so you have to check the third bundle as well. Why does Rebbe say you have to check the third bundle? 2 bundles should be enough. He says you make a chazakah if you check twice. So Gemara says no. That's talking about where where we are assuming or concerned that the bundles were each bought from different individuals. Therefore, you have to check the third one because the fact that you check the first 2 doesn't create a chazakah, and the third one is purchased from someone else. So Gemara says, if that's the case, so then why only do you have to check 3? Each bundle has to be checked because each one cannot use any of the other ones as a chazakah for it. You have to check the 4th one and the 5th one also. So Gemara says, yes, that's what he means. He means to say that it's not enough to check 2 and create a chazakah. You cannot rely on chazakah. You have to check more than the 2 of chazakah. You have to check the 3rd one. But that's enough to say. He holds that 2 is a chazakah. So once he says you need to check the 3rd, then you understand that he's saying that there's no chazakah. You have to check the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and the 6th. He's not going to list every single one. That's what he means to say. You can't rely on the chazakah. Okay, now we go back to analyzing our Mishnah and the various different halachas we had seen in the end of the Mishnah. So the first one over there was, it said that there's a special halacha if you find tefillin in tzvatim or krichos. They're both types of bundles of tefillin. The Gemara wants to know what's the difference between tzvatim and krichos. The Gemara says they both mean a bundle of tefillin. Tzvatim means that they're a pair. Shel yad and shel rosh bundled together in a pair. Krichos just means a whole bunch of tefillin together, not necessarily a pair, not necessarily 2, all bundled together as one. Okay, then the Mishnah had said that if you have that, then you should stand there and wait and keep an eye on it until Shabbos is over and then bring them in. So the Gemara again asks, why do you have to wait till Shabbos is over and bring them in? Why don't you just carry them in right away, now? So the Gemara says, we're talking about a case where there are so many tefillin you couldn't possibly get them all in before Shabbos is over. That being the case, you're going to be working anyway until the end of Shabbos. So then we don't say you have to bring them in. You could just stand there and watch them, make sure they don't get destroyed, and then you could bring them in when Shabbos is over. The next phrase in the Mishnah was about what to do when it's a shas hasakana. Shas hasakana means it's a time of danger. The Mishnah doesn't specify what the danger is, but it tells us there's a machlokes. The Gemara here, at least according to Rashi, Sakim Shat, which we're going to go with, the Gemara is assuming that this phrase is going back on all cases of the Mishnah. And any type of situation in the Mishnah in which there's a danger, so the Tanakhama's advice is to just cover it with a towel, protect it as best you can, and walk away. Rav Shimon says make a human chain so that you could bring it into a Rosh Hashanah and be able to carry it there. So now the Gemara asks, there's a brisa that has the third solution. The brisa says you can carry it in yourself by stopping within 4 amos. Then we know that the halacha is that you're only chayav an issur d'oraisa if you carry something 4 amos in one shot. If you stop every 3.5 amos, you won't violate an issur d'oraisa. It's only an issur d'orabanan. Chazal should let you do that. So the Gemara wants to know, why doesn't the Tanakhama give that solution? So the Gemara says there's 2 types of danger. There's a danger where the goyim will kill you if they catch you wearing tefillin. In a situation like that, you want to make sure you do things very much quietly. If you're going to stop every 3 yamas, then it's going to attract attention and you'll be in trouble. So it's better just cover it and leave. So that's that case. The case of the Brisa that says you could bring it in by stopping every less than 4 amas, that's talking about where the danger is that you get robbed. So we're assuming the robbers won't just be happening by right then. Even if when they rob you, they might kill you, but it's not about attracting attention to tefillin. That's not the issue. So Gemara says, but hold on a second. If the Mishnah is talking about where there's a gzeira that they'll kill somebody who wears tefillin, how could Reb Shimon say to make a human chain to bring them in? Making a human chain, that certainly attracts a lot of attention. So Gemara says you have to reread it over here. You have to chesure mechsera, and you should say as follows, that this entire discussion that you're allowed to just cover the tefillin, that's talking about when you have the danger of the goyim and exeri not allowed to wear tefillin. However, in a case where there's a sakana, the danger is because of roving marauders, because of thieves who might rob you and kill you. So there the Tanna Kama says carry it 4 amos, and Reb Shimon says carry it less than 4 amos, and Reb Shimon says make a human chain. So their dispute is about the case where there's the danger of the robbers. Where the case where there's the danger of the decree of the goyim, there's no argument. You shouldn't be doing anything there that will attract attention. You know, we're asking Reb Shimon, what exactly is the machlokes between Reb Shimon and Tanna Kama, whether it's preferable to carry 4 amos or make a human chain? What's the difference between that? So Gemara says that according to Reb Shimon, it's better to make a human chain because if we let you carry it just under 4 amos, you may accidentally carry it just over 4 amos, and then you did an issa d'oraisa. According to the Tanna Kama, it's better to make less than 4 amos because if you make a human chain, it's going to attract attention. A lot of people will be aware of it. We're not worried about sakana now, but the issue is that people will think that this is mutter. You think you're allowed to do this in Shabbos. It's only permitted here because there's extenuating circumstances to save the tefillin. We don't want people to learn a wrong halacha from this. Okay, the next phrase in the Mishnah said you can do that to bring your son in from the fields. And says, what's your son doing in the fields? How did that happen? So the Gemara says maybe your wife was out in the fields and she gave birth out there in the field. Now you want to bring him into a rishos ha'yachid, a protected area. Out in the field is not safe for a newborn. So Gemara says, what's the chiddush where it says you're even allowed to call 100 people to help make the human chain if necessary? So Gemara said, even though it's not comfortable for the child and it's not necessarily healthy for the child to be passed from hand to hand through 100 people, but still, that's better than carrying him less than 4 amos at a time. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to the last phrase in the Mishnah, which was a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, whether or not you can use the human chain to bring in a barrel of water that was outside the tchum. Could you bring it inside the tchum? So Rabbi Yehuda says yes, you can. So the Gemara says, why would Rabbi Yehuda hold that? Doesn't he agree to the halacha that an object has its own tchum? You can't move an object out of its tchum. Why does it help if you have a human chain? Whoever's crossing the tchum line, the object has its tchum, you're crossing the line. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. So the Gemara offers a few answers over here. The Gemara's first answer is that we're talking about where you're not moving the barrel, you're pouring the contents of the barrel from one barrel to the next. The human chain is transferring just the water, not the barrel. And Rabbi Yehuda holds, the barrel gets a tchum, water does not get a tchum. Where do you see such halacha? So Rabbi Yehuda in a Mishnah says a very similar halacha. He says that if a woman made a dough and she borrowed water from one neighbor and flour and salt from another neighbor, such that the dough is made out of different ingredients and those ingredients have different tchumen, and those tchumen don't overlap. The water is in one tchum, the flour is in a different tchum, and they don't overlap. So the dough, which has both of them, is forbidden to move because it doesn't have any tchum at all. On that, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, the water doesn't count. Water that's absorbed in the dough is not an issue. It doesn't get its own tchum. So here too, Rabbi Yehuda would say that the water doesn't get a tchum, and the barrel's being left behind. You're just pouring the water. So there's no problem. So Gemara says, okay, first of all, what does it mean when the Chachamim argue on that? They say that it can't go more than its tchum. So you have to reread that. Instead of lo tihalach zu, it's lo yihalech ma shebezu. You shouldn't move what's inside this. That's the water. The Chachamim hold that the water has its tchum, and therefore they say you can't move the water that's inside the barrel. Okay, I have to change the language there a little. But the bigger problem is that Rabbi Yehuda only said that the water has no tchum when it's part of a dough. When the water itself is in a pot, Rabbi Yehuda clearly in the Mishnah says that you can't, even if you're going to pour it out of the pot, because the water there is not absorbed in a dough. It is very visible. It's solid. It has its own presence. So here in this case, you have a barrel full of water. It's not even in a pot. It's not even part of a soup. It's just in a barrel filled. Certainly, he would say that it has a tchum. So that heter is not going to help you. So Rava gives another answer over here. Rava says, we're talking about where the barrel, you're again transferring just the water, not the barrel. The barrel has a tchum, but we're talking about the water never got a tchum at all. Not because water never has a tchum, but because in this case the water never had a tchum. What's that? You filled up the barrel on Shabbos from a flowing river. Lacha is that a river doesn't get a tchum because the river is constantly flowing from one place to another. If you fill it up on Shabbos, the water has no tchum, and then you're transferring that from barrel to barrel, and therefore there's no problem with the tchum over there. And that's pshat in Rabbi Huda. Now, actually, the truth is, Rava adds, you're even allowed to carry the barrel then, because the barrel becomes bottled to the water. The barrel's only function is to serve the water, to carry the water. And therefore, its halacha is subservient to the halacha of the water. And just like the water doesn't have a tchum limits, the barrel doesn't have a tchum limit at all. We see the same thing in other cases. You're allowed to carry somebody in a bed, since you're allowed to carry the person, because you have a rule chay noises. That's when you carry a living creature. It's not called carrying. He has his own life force, which lifts him, and the bed is just carrying the person. Therefore, you're allowed to carry the bed. Same thing is if you have a kli that is carrying food less than the minimum amount of food. Therefore, it's mutter to carry the food, and it's less than the minimum amount to be chayav the isser of carrying, and therefore there's no chiyav deraisa if you carry the food. So there's no chiyav deraisa for carrying the object, the bowl that the food is in, because it is again subservient to the food itself. So that's why you're allowed to carry the water here. The water has no tchum, and the barrel is subservient to the water. Now, Rav Yosef has a kasha on that. We have a statement where Rav Yehuda says you're only allowed to make a human chain to carry the water in the barrel in a case where you have a caravan of people that were traveling and they camped for Shabbos, and therefore they need water, and there's no other solution. Everybody needs to drink, and they don't have an eruv. So there we made a special leniency. You can pass the barrel from hand to hand using a human chain. But if you're not in such an extenuating circumstance, he would not say that you're allowed to do that. So how do you explain it? So Rav Yosef wants to say, therefore, our mission must also be talking about a caravan, and that's why you don't have a kasha. You asked the kasha from the case of the water in the pot, where Rav Yehuda says it has a tchum. Here, there's a leniency. The leniency is because we're talking about a caravan, so we're stuck. That solves the stira, and it also answers the kasha. So Abaye says differently. Abaye says we'll solve the stira. We don't need Rav Yosef's minimizing that we're talking about a case where it's a caravan. Abaye says, no. The special halacha for a caravan, that's even if the barrel and the water have a tchum. Here, where we're allowing it without a caravan, is talking about where the barrel has a tchum and the water does not have a tchum. The water was from a flowing river, and therefore the barrel is subservient to the river. You're allowed to carry it. You don't have to worry about tchum. That's the difference between our case and the case of caravan. Caravan has a bigger heter, even if there is a tchum, both on the water and on the barrel. And here it's referring to where there's no tchum on the water, and that's why it's more lenient than the case of the caravan. You don't need the extenuating circumstance of the caravan to permit it. Now Rav Ashi gives another answer to explain Pshat in Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Ashi says we're talking about where the barrel is hefker and the water is hefker. None of them have a tchum because none of them belong to anybody. Rabbi Yehuda holds that an object which doesn't have an owner doesn't get a tchum. It's the tchum of an object is the tchum of its owner. If it has no owner, it has no tchum. So then what's pshat in the opinion that argues? The Chachamim will say that it does have a tchum. You're not allowed to carry it. They hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri famously says that an object does have a tchum, even without owners. It doesn't get a tchum by dint of its owner's tchum. It gets its own tchum. Every object gets a natural 2,000 amma range in which it is allowed to move. More than that, you're not. And that fully explains the machlokes, and now we understand it. Okay, this ends the Gemara. Now we get to the last Mishnah here, the end of the daf. The Mishnah is talking about somebody who was reading a sefer. Their svarim were all rolls, and if you dropped part of it, it would roll away. So the Mishnah teaches the halachas of what happens if it rolls away from you into or close to a reshus that you cannot take something out of. Now, the issues are as follows. When the scroll rolled out of your hand, and you're still holding one end, and the other end is in a different reshus, so the scroll is partially in your reshus, partially in a different reshus. That's not an iser d'oraisa to roll it back up, because it's not fully in a different reshus. There is, however, concern that if we allow you to roll it up, you may end up rolling it up even when it is fully in a different reshus. That would be gzeira d'Rabbanan, and that's why you shouldn't be allowed to roll it up. We have to balance that against the fact that if it's a sefer kodesh, there is a bizayon to the sefer to be left unrolled all Shabbos. So the question is how to balance those concerns. So the Mishnah discusses two cases. The first case is where you're sitting on a skupa, that's like a threshold, and it rolls out of your hand into Rishus Harabim. So we just have the halacha here that you're allowed to roll it up. We don't have a gzeira. In order to avoid bizayon, we allow you to roll it up. However, if you were sitting on the roof and it rolled, one end rolled out of your hand and fell down, the question is, where is it ending? If it's hanging above 10 tfachim, so that means that it's not in the bottom 10 tfachim close to the ground, so it's not in Rishus HaYachid, then it's not in Rishus Harabim at all. So then you are allowed to roll it up. Everybody agrees to that. Now, if it is within 10 tfachim, so according to the Tanakama, you can't, because that's where we make Gzeira, and we don't want you to roll it up where part of it is hanging in Rishus Harabim, and therefore you should just leave it hanging there, turn it over so that the letters aren't facing outwards, you avoid that bizayon. Now Rabbi Yehuda, however, says, no, as long as it's not resting on the ground, it hasn't reached the ground yet, even if it's within 10 tfachim, you're allowed to roll it up to avoid that bizayon. We don't make a gzeira unless it's really on the ground in Rishus Harabim. Rabbi Shimon says we never make a gzeira. He says even if it's all the way on the ground, it's reached to the ground, and it's lying on the ground in Rishus Harabim, we still allow you to roll it up. There is no gzeira in a situation where we have tremendous disgrace happening to Sefer.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.